paper quite well is on the housing finance post-COVID-19, the lessons and opportunities for the emerging markets. What you need to know is that the paper will capture the COVID-19 pandemic where we are currently, the global perspective and the Nigerian perspective, the responses to the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact on housing, then the lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic for emerging economies, and the conclusion, of course. So my first, that one is we'll have to look at the global, because since it emerged in December 2019, the COVID-19 pandemic has been dramatic change in life, as we know, both in the economics and health system. But we have to know that the economies and health system are seeing the signs of recovery with the vaccinations in the first half of the 2021. The efforts are open now for the upcoming economies to start life under the new normal. However, as you quite well know that the concerns are rising due to the third wave of the COVID-19, which has driven by the virulent Delta variant of the COVID-19, which you learned is more devastating. But the pertinent questions we need to ask, being asked now, are that when will there be an end to this pandemic? How effective will the vaccinations be against the future strains and variants? I've had my 2 shots on the vaccine, but someone was telling me I have to be careful with the third variant because it might be more devastating. It may not even recognize the vaccine. So we have to keep praying. And how soon will you see some of the semblance of stability of the global economy, and what will be the long-term impact of COVID-19 on health and the economies of the nations? So for Nigeria, since we have looked at the global, for Nigeria, thankfully the health impact relatively mild in sub-Saharan Africa and Nigeria as a whole, both locally in Nigeria. I think we are one of the luckiest nations or the luckiest race in the world. However, the socio-economic impact has seen a devastating, particularly for Nigeria, because we suffered twin shocks. Because apart from the shocks of the COVID-19, there's a fall in the national revenues arising from the Russian-Saudi oil war, price war in the 2020. So Nigerian economy slipped back into recession, and by mid-2020, following the slight recovery from the 2016 financial crisis. However, we are very optimistic economically because the outlook for 2022, after the rebound of the last quarter of 2020, you will see some semblance. From the graph, you can see that the GDP has dived down after 2020, then it started rising. So also the real GDP also rose, and then that of the CPI, which is a consumer protection index, and the budget balance has also been rising, with the current account, which is also rising to that level. The policy response, if you look at the responses of the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact on housing, the first one is the policy response to COVID-19. Apart from the lockdowns and restrictions in movements, government across the globe has taken fiscal monetary policies to address the economic fallout of the pandemic. In Nigeria in particular, the combination of government and CBN initiatives are that of the fiscal measures and then the monetary measures. From the fiscal measures, there is a revision of the budgetary targets, including the 550 billion naira COVID-19 intervention fund. All agencies and ministries were asked during the pandemic to reduce their budget downwards by almost 30%. There's also 150 billion naira support for subnational entities. There's a conditional cash transfers to 3.6 million households through social register that was taking place at that time. There's a business wage support where some small businesses were supported in order to pay their wages for their own staff who were unable to move out during the pandemic. And we also have the public works programs. For the monetary measures, there is a forbearance on the interventions, loans by reduction of interest rates from 9% to 5%. There's also reduction of monetary and policy rates. There's a proposed injection of 3.6 trillion into the banking sector to support the health with 100 billion naira, manufacturing 1.2 trillion, 2 trillion, and the real estate of 1.5 trillion. That's a creation of 50 billion naira target facility, and of course, the currency devaluation. Another response is the under actions on the housing sector, which is more particular to this, is there were quick interventions for rental and mortgage composites of the housing sector by most national governments. Particularly we in the mortgage sector, we gave our own concessions. Those who could not pay their own mortgages, concessions were given to them if there are enough reasons to know that. On the real market, we have suspended evictions were also suspended, because you cannot evict somebody during the COVID-19, so you cannot go out to fend for himself. So at that time, there is the suspensions of evictions, extended rental contracts, there is rent freezes, and even rent subsidies were given at that time. The mortgage debt markets were also not affected in the housing sector, which is the mortgage forbearance, the foreclosure suspension, because the time you suspend evictions, you have to do that as well. Then the mortgage repayment support and tax difference. Other impact which is worth noting is the impact of response and actions of house prices. Because house prices appreciate in most developed countries in 2021 currently. In US up to 13%, in Canada 7%, and kept on going, Australia 6%, and year on 23% in New Zealand and 9.5% in UK. But caution must be taken as exercise to avoid the reliefs and the interventions resulting in long-term market distortions, because housing price bubbles as a result of interest rate mitigations for tax exemptions and withdrawal of rental housing. From this one, the graph, you can see that the impact is there, then the relief measures are there, and the possible long-term distortions are all enumerated, as I said earlier. Then if you go to the real response of the impact, we need to go to the lessons learned, since we have discussed about the impact, the response. The lessons are that affordability for demand side housing finance will become more critical in the face of falling or outright loss of income going forward. And then there's also the housing needs are changing, the real estate landscape, and need timely response, because homes have now turned into, they are no longer accommodation living spaces, but they are transforming into workplaces, as well as work goes remotely currently during that time. The second group, abusers who's in the age bracket of 25 to 35 years, will drive the new dynamics of housing needs, either as renters or home buyers. Because those age brackets, they have more different demands currently. Within the Nigerian market, real estate developers already are witnessing preferential of smaller or more compact and functional spaces, like studio houses and two-bedroom flats. Existing large properties are being remodeled to offer shared or temporary accommodation, especially in the upscale areas, to make rising property prices more affordable. The other lesson is that technology and innovation, which you all know, with the technology of this 3D during the COVID-19, it will make a lot of impact at that. For FMBN, as we quite well know that Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria, we have embarked on adoption of core banking solutions and that technology. And during the economic, there was a National Economic Sustainability Program by the federal government of Nigeria at that time, which appointed the vice president to be the chairman of that. Institutions were encouraged to make an impact, especially create jobs and ensure that they reduce poverty and they reduce the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic at that time. FMBN was not left out to the production of 5,000 housing units. We have to fund 5,000 housing units with 40 billion naira in order to reduce the effect of COVID. The contract for this has been awarded. Most developers have already on site for these ones. So in the conclusion aspect of it, you'll find that the impact of COVID-19 pandemic has been devastating to health and economic life of countries, including the emerging economies which face additional economic challenges arising from poor fundamentals. But after a general lull, the real estate sector is experiencing rise or is experiencing an uptick. And the more preferred destination of investments, shunning the more volatile money and quality of market in most economies, as evidenced in the rising property prices. This positive trend, however, implies more pressure on achieving affordability and accessibility for the medium and low income market as macroeconomic indicators turn negative. The need for government interventions to stabilize economics and housing markets remain paramount in the near future, despite the risk of rising price bubbles. Despite these, opportunities exist for growing housing markets in emerging economies by public and private sector initiatives that key into emerging trends and preferences and integrating innovative technologies and practices. That's why I found this presentation by the last presenters on 3D technology very interesting. The other questions, which I'm sure people will ask a lot of questions when it comes to that. How affordable are they and how could they be deployed to the low-income segment of the housing? Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Keep a date with Housing Development Program every week on TVC. Housing Development is the first and pioneer housing program in Nigeria and by extension, Africa. It remains the authentic voice of the Nigerian housing and construction industry. Housing Development is the only credible and specialized platform for seasoned professionals in the build industry, where quality and credible players in the real estate sector meet to interact, showcase, and analyze government policies. It is no doubt that hundreds of thousands of prospective Nigerians who desire to own their personal properties have done so through the assistance of Housing Development Program in the last 10 years. If you are a stakeholder in the build industry, here is where you must be. We are authentic, credible, and supported by all the leading professionals in the build industry. Housing Development on TVC.